I'd like to call the meeting of the Urbana City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Bowersox Johnson.
Present.
Mr. Jacobson.
Here.
Mr. Lewis.
Here.
Miss Marlin.
Here.
Mr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Smythe.
Here.
Miss Stevenson.
Present.
Mayor Pressing.
Here. The first item is approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, February 18th, 2013.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Okay, motion by Dennis Roberts, seconded by Eric Jacobson. Any discussion? Questions, additions, corrections? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Are there any additions to the agenda?
I have a quick request.
Okay.
I'd like to request, because we have visitors here to do a presentation on a Malawi journey, that item number G, reports to special committee of special committees, be moved forward to come after item number D, petitions and communications, but before unfinished business. If that be appropriate for the council to approve that.
Is that okay? All right, we'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll start with petitions and communications. Bishop King James Underwood has no comments, but he's here for Ellis Subdivision sewer problems, as is Reverend Dr. Evelyn B. Underwood. Esther Pat. Yeah. But
Hi, thank you. My name is Esther Pratt. I live at 706 South Fuller. I'm here tonight on behalf of Champaign Urbana Tenant Union. I just want to say a few words to you about the condemnation of those three properties on Silver Street last week.
Your microphone might not be on here.
I'm sorry.
There we go.
Yeah, you've got it. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
I want to talk about the condemnation of the properties on Silver Street last week. The city of Urbana does a far better job with regard to inspecting properties than, well, many other cities that I will not name. But there are some cities very nearby where the problem that occurred at those properties would probably not have been discovered until the staircase collapsed. Because the only way the cities ever inspects is when a tenant complains. And your systematic inspection finds problems. And particularly, I think that, well, your housing inspectors are fantastic, and Clay Beyer has been here, I think it's about 10 years. I hear nothing but good reports from tenants about him, and I think his diligence with regard to these properties had to do with how the problem was identified. Unfortunately, the consequence of condemnation, though, is always puts the tenants who live there in a bind. And if you just quickly glance through the story in the Gazette or saw the story on TV, you might think, oh, wow, the city had to condemn, but fortunately everyone was relocated. And that's the truth, but that's not the whole truth. The whole truth is that the people were all moved into properties owned by the same person who owned the properties you had to condemn because the landlord neglected them, and that's the same landlord against whom the city has filed criminal housing management charges. When a place is condemned, the tenants have the legal right to walk away and get a better landlord, and the landlord legally owes them deposit, any prepaid rent, their moving costs, and any other damages that they suffer as a result of the breach of the lease. Rarely in these condemnation situations do the tenants have an opportunity to exercise their legal right, and in this particular case, actually, from what we were told, no one ended up homeless. I just heard in the audience that not everybody did move into apartments there, and I'll follow up on that. But at any rate, there are a few changes you need to make that can make a big difference. And I spoke with the mayor this afternoon, and she's interested, and I think we'll bring something to you soon about following the best practices in other communities where assistance is provided to tenants when condemnation results in their having to move. The city could play a more active role, and I encourage you to do that. There's also something that's, I won't say more immediate, but as immediate, but that might be able to help some people. The Housing Authority of Champaign County last September adopted preference points for awarding Section 8 vouchers. And they have a few hundred vouchers on hand right now that they are not giving out because they're stockpiling them for development projects like the 36 units at the New Hamilton on the park that you're going to hear about. But they have more than 36 vouchers available. And one of the preference points they established was giving preference to people who are displaced by government action. The reason they wanted this was for the Bristol Place redevelopment in Champaign, but HUD told them it's illegal for a countywide housing authority to give preference for a project in one of the cities. And so they approached, or either they or Champaign approached Libby Tyler here at the city and people in Mahomet, city governments in Savoy, and other places, and asked them all to support this preference because it could help the cities when they do things like condemn properties. And y'all sent in the letters supporting it, and the policy was adopted. So that policy exists, but since the Section 8 waiting list isn't open, I'm not sure you could have asked for those vouchers last week for the tenants who needed them. I would like to suggest that you put on your agenda for next week's meeting whatever it takes, Mayor, I don't know, a resolution or something for the City of Urbana to request the Housing Authority of Champaign County to open the availability of Section 8 vouchers for tenants displaced by government action. This isn't going to bring a flood of people to their door because when tenants are displaced by government action, it doesn't happen often, and it would be if Urbana or Champaign or some other place condemned property or for the Bristol property. And that way, the next time a condemnation occurs, you won't have this time crunch of, there might have been help available from the Housing Authority, but darn, we have to get it on the agenda of their next meeting of the Board of Commissioners before we can get this assistance available. So basically, it's just opening the door now. And I don't know if they would do it, but I think you should ask, and it certainly wouldn't. It wouldn't take any real time or money. You just have to pass a resolution and send them a letter, and maybe the mayor call Ed Bland and ask, hey, can you do this? We think it would be a good idea. And then bigger picture is passing an ordinance to establish relocation assistance for tenants. I encourage you to do that. It really is, it's just heartbreaking to me that these tenants who could have gotten away instead and they are locked into leases. Their leases basically just transferred when they took different apartments. They're locked into leases at a property that is not anywhere near as bad as what was condemned, but Diane Marlin and I walked through that property on Friday, and there was a tenant complaint and request for an inspection a month ago there.
Ms. Pat,
Yeah.
you have 1 minute.
I think there are cockroaches. There are other problems with water damage from leaks in the pipes, and this poor woman in this cockroach apartment, and her apartment's so clean, and she hasn't even got a lot of stuff, but the seal on her fridge is broken, so not only is that affecting the usability of the refrigerator, but the roaches are getting into the fridge. I don't know if you have roaches, you put cereal and stuff like that, take it out of the cabinet, put it in the fridge so the roaches can't get to it, but if the roaches can get in through the fridge because the seal is wiggly instead of straight, then you can't even hide your food from them. And people just shouldn't have to live like that. They won't die from it, and it's not as bad as a condemnation, but we can do better, you can do better, and I have ideas of how you can, and I hope you will pursue them. Thank you.
Brandon.
One of your specific suggestions, I just want to understand a little more. It sounds like in terms of what we communicate to tenants in situations like these, you're saying that we should have some kind of notice or letter or brochure or something that explains their rights in terms of their state law,
Yes.
legal ability to get out of their lease, not first or last month's or whatever, and be able to walk away and leave. And do you know if we or any city around here currently
around
does
here?
that?
Around
Yeah.
here? No.
Okay.
I know. I think pretty much,
But there
homeowners are the people who governments are interested in, and tenants can go fly a kite.
Right.
That tends to be a very prevalent attitude. And in Urbana, where close to 2/3 of the households are tenants, and where people like
Yeah.
you are of the city government, I think better
Yeah.
can
If you-
and will be accomplished.
If you can find any good examples of a flyer, letter, brochure,
I could
anything
write a flyer
like that,
for you.
well, that would work too.
Yes.
I'd love to kind of see what message you are advocating for us to share with tenants. And I think you're
Uh-huh.
right. It's important at that moment to not just shuffle them into another lease with the same landlord as their only option,
Yeah.
but to at least make their options
Yeah.
clear to them.
Or to not just, in some ways the scenario could be worse. Sometimes, like if you remember what happened with Gateway Studios, it was just everyone, you heard on the news that everyone was relocated. Wrong. Everyone was given money that came from the private sector, not from the government, and there's no reason it shouldn't have been able to come from the government, but money for 3 nights in the hotel. So everyone was basically put out of the way in different locations where the TV news and newspapers could no longer interview them and make you all aware of it. But 4 days later, they all had nowhere to go. And so this is better, but not much. And if there were a little bit of assistance financially and a little more time, then you could have better outcomes.
Okay, and my one last question, then I just want to make sure I understand the role the Housing Authority could play. If all the Section 8 vouchers in this community are already used and there's a waiting list, then opening the waiting list doesn't mean all of a sudden if 20 people need it from an apartment that there's 20 vouchers.
Okay, but that's not the case. In August, the Housing Authority had 223 vouchers that were not in use, and even though approximately 200 families were on the waiting list, they wouldn't open those vouchers, make those vouchers available to them because they're holding the vouchers for the various development projects. Hamilton on the Park, I think in May they're going to start signing leases there, and those are going to be, and they're converting 36 vouchers of those 223 from tenant-based to project-based, which means they attach the apartment for Bristol, and they also released either 25 or 50 to Oakwood Trace and Champaign. They also said at their meetings that 8 to 10 new vouchers become available every month. So it's going down, it's going up, but the rest they're holding, and they're going to continue to stockpile for the project they're doing for the Dorsey redevelopment, which is projected to be fall of 2014. So, no, if you had 150 people who needed relocation and you called and said, we want 150 vouchers, yeah, they'd probably say, no, we need them for this project a year and a half from now. But if out of the 19 households that were affected last week, and I make up these numbers because I know the real one, but if 9 of them already have a Section 8 voucher, and 4 of them didn't need one, or even if 9 had it and needed only 10, I mean, a lot of times you're talking about a small number. And when I came to you before, and other people did 4 years ago about relocation assistance, you were scared by the worst possible scenario where you wouldn't be able to afford it, therefore you should never do it any time. And then there are other times where, in City of Champaign, something like this happened a couple months ago with people displaced from condemnation. It was 6 households. You folks had one in 2007 at a Gabe's Place property where there were a lot of units, but he evicted most of the people for non-payment of rent. To the best of my knowledge, there were 2 households where the people's rent was current and they should have gotten relocation assistance. Any agency, including the Housing Authority, who provides any kind of assistance, could have handled 2 people. So it's about having the option open, and then maybe it wouldn't work, but right now in theory the option's open because the Housing Authority did establish this policy, but I think you have to ask them to trigger it to be open so that when you need it, you can call and not have them say, well, we'll put it on the agenda for the March 23rd meeting, and then in April will be available. That doesn't help people on February 28th.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Charlie?
Yeah, Esther, I'm a little confused, but you said that the federal government said that they couldn't hold the vouchers specifically, but they're still...
Well, no, they couldn't have a policy saying, we're going to give preference to households that are being displaced at Bristol Park neighborhood in Champaign for the Bristol Park neighborhood project. They can't designate them for a municipal project. If you wanted to do, if you wanted them to promise to give preference to Urbana's redevelopment on Kerr Avenue or something, they can't do that because it's a countywide housing authority and you're just one of the cities in it. But they can establish a preference, which they did like for veterans or for persons displaced by government action. And what makes it legal is what really, I mean, I guess in theory, but the whole idea is if those are available so that if Urbana needs it, or Savoy needs it, or Rantoul needs it, or Champaign needs it, if it's people displaced by government action, the people are eligible, that part they can do legally. So basically, simple answer, they couldn't say preference points for Bristol Place tenants. They could say preference points for anyone in Champaign County displaced by government action. And that's what they did. So that means that people like the folks from last week actually would have been eligible if the logistics had been worked out.
But in effect, though, the Housing Authority is sitting on vouchers for...
Well, they're sitting on vouchers for their own. That's different. That's not for municipal developments. They're sitting on vouchers for their own development projects. They are partnering with, I think you'll hear a presentation later, they're partnering with the Benoit Group to develop.
Okay.
Yeah, you know that.
You've separated them out.
Yeah.
Okay, now that was where I was getting confused. Okay.
Okay.
So So speaking of the housing authority, it's my understanding that rents are going up for displaced and disabled, disabled and other eligibles.
Actually, I believe it's for everyone on Section 8. Right now, the way, I'll try to explain this real simply. The Section 8 standard for how much rent the tenant pays is that a tenant household should not pay more than 30% of their income for rent and utilities. And that's true throughout the country. And so when they figure out how much rent you have to pay, they have a formula for utility allowance. They take 30% of your income, deduct the utility allowance, and some people with disabilities also can get or some people can get a deduction for medical expense, and then the balance is the amount the tenant pays, and then the housing authority pays the difference between the amount the tenant pays and rent, provided that rent is within a certain limit set by Department of Housing and Urban Development. A few housing authorities, and Champaign Housing Authority of Champaign County is one of them, have been designated by HUD as moving to work agencies, which means a lot of other things, but it also means they don't have to follow rules like that. And the Housing Authority has decided as part of that to eliminate the utility allowance. So basically everyone's rent in the Section 8 program, everyone, not just people with disabilities, everyone's rent is going to go up in the amount of their utility allowance. And I told you today about a woman who's on disability. Her sole income is $698 a month. Her rent is only $98 now. It's going up to $217. Now, $217 is still lower rent than most people get, so it's not like, this is a bad program, but she's going to have a rent increase of over 100%. And she's going to have to pay $217 of her $698 total income just for rent, and that's going to affect a lot of people. You're going to see, all the different things you're concerned about with poverty. Is there are about 1,500 households in Champaign County. Let's guess a third of them are in Urbana, is the way the numbers tend to work out, who are going to have rent increases of somewhere between. The two clients I've talked to gave me exact numbers. One is a $115 a month rent increase. Another one was a $175 a month, and those are one-bedroom apartments. In the 2- and 3-bedroom, and those would be the families with children who have my personal opinion, that's the greatest need is for children. Their utility allowances are higher because their apartments are higher, which means their rent increase is going to be higher. And so there is going to be yet another level of economic hardship inflicted upon the poorest people of our community very soon. I think it's April 1st this goes into effect.
And do you know why there's nobody here from the housing authority that I can see?
They're going to be here because they're making a presentation, right?
Well, I would have thought they'd be here by now.
Well, when they show, you could ask them about this too.
Yeah, well, do you know how they're justifying this? Yeah, they're going to use the extra money for additional rent for people, or what?
Well, actually, I don't know, and to be honest with you, I was not aware of when they initially initiated this. I wasn't going to their monthly meetings. I wasn't aware of it. But then you start hearing presentations, and in fact, there was a presentation in this very spot in January League of Women Voters meeting, and the woman from the Housing Authority talked about a number of things that happened to mention about, and we're eliminating the utility allowance. And I'm sure that to 99% of people in this community, it doesn't mean anything. But you're eliminating the utility allowance? I think that means a rent increase. And yeah, that's what it turned out to be. But you can ask them.
Okay.
Okay, Dennis.
And just to illustrate the situation of a person who's living on $625 a month to pay for all their life needs, when the rent goes up from $95 or whatever you said to $215, as I've had a discussion with a person, it means that the person has to really make a decision when they're shopping whether they can afford to buy peppermint tea. That becomes a difficult decision as far as luxury items in a shopping list, and I thought that was pretty telling.
Well, I know you'd ask me a question, but the person with $698 a month isn't buying luxury items now. The person whose income is $1,250 a month might buy peppermint tea, but at $698 a month, I don't. Frankly, even with rent of $217, I don't know how someone can afford groceries, and I would think they would have to make use of one of the many different, go sit in line for 3 hours to get food from, this pantry and that pantry because. Rent, utilities, and food are pretty much all you can afford. And if you have transportation needs or medical needs, I don't see how you can survive on that. I've never understood how people could survive on a disability check. And those are the folks who need that the help the most.
Okay, Diane.
Well, we had an interesting day on Friday, and I wanted to thank you for this. But my question is, how soon can you have that guide for tenants? Did you have?
I can make something up. I shut off something real fast last week that you
Yeah.
saw, but that was and that was somewhat with them in mind, it really would be ideal if information were, if there's something more specific and targeted, like if you didn't just flyer everyone, but there actually were an opportunity to have human interaction with
Right.
the tenants.
Yes.
But I can put together something generic that you can use. I mean, I could do that the next couple of
Okay.
days if you want. I'll send it to you. You can have a look if you like it. Share it with the people
Okay.
here.
And like you, I was very sorry to learn that the tenants had been relocated to within the same landlord's buildings. But I was hoping that we could have taken advantage of the fact there are many other landlords and apartment buildings very close by to these particular properties, and with a little more time, maybe we could have worked something out. And so whatever we do in terms of looking at our relocation procedures, I would like it to include communication with nearby landlords and working with nearby landlords to see what kinds of
Right.
options we can make for tenants.
Well, and I want to encourage you to make use of the tenant union services.
thing,
I mean,
yes.
frankly, you and I chatted, again, not to name any names, the immediate option nearest by that was available is not exactly the most stellar landlord in town, but is a far, far better thing than what ended up happening. But sometimes when people when you look for convenience or proximity, and the tenants make the same mistakes like this too, you often go into something really bad. Like, I know if someone lives in that neighborhood and wants to stay in that neighborhood, they might want to, but if truth be known, I could find them something cheap with a good landlord in North Urbana or even, in Champaign, not just saying, like, oh, it'd be really convenient, just move all these people to all this place. If there are 19 different households, they have 19 different needs, and they might end up at 19 different places if they had some choices.
But that's something
Yeah.
the tenant union could
Yeah,
help
we
with
can
as
definitely
well.
work with it. It's real hard to do that on less than 24 hours notice.
Right.
So a little more time would help. And the amount of time involved in these things varies from case to case, but where there's time, there's possible. And then the other thing is the money. I mean, I don't want to go into the whole proposal now because I don't want to take up too much of your time, but basically the idea is the landlord owes the tenant all this money, and what other communities do is make the landlord either give them the money or is in debt to the city for the amount of the money, plus fines for not having given the tenants the money, plus court costs and attorney's fees, so that the city can front the money and then get it back from the landlord. And when that's possible, then you don't have to just look at where is there a place that's as cheap as the place that was so bad you had to condemn. You can look at places that cost a little more because the tenants might be able to afford it if they're made whole when they leave and can get damages. Anything else?
Okay.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Diane, for coming with me on Friday. I really appreciated that.
You're welcome.
Okay. Dwight Redding. Okay, so you don't need to talk? Okay. Nancy Hyatt. Please give your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Nancy Hyatt. I'm here representing the Center for Women in Transition, administrative offices located at 508 East Church Street. I'm here in regards to the discussion on social service funding allocations. I regret, because we just moved to Urbana, that I have missed the other city council meetings around this. I had read a little bit in the paper, and I saw someone at the United Way luncheon this past Friday that suggested that I come here and speak on behalf of what I'm hoping you're all going to do is to allocate some funding towards social service programs.
We're discussing it, but,
Okay.
if you feel you've missed a council meeting, you can look it up on your computer. We
And-
have endless amounts of council meetings for the truly passionate person who wants to go to all our meetings.
And I will make a point of doing that as soon as I
Okay.
finish unpacking.
Okay.
But I'm here tonight because I would like to absolutely encourage all of you to vote on behalf of allocating funding, and I hope to the Center for Women in Transition. As you may or may not know, we are the organization that provides housing for homeless women and kids and a domestic violence shelter here in Urbana as well. In the past, the city has been very generous to our organization in allocating money for renovations at the shelters and the domestic violence shelter as well. And my understanding is at this point in time, there will not be any CDBG funding for renovations, remodelings, things that need to be done at the shelters. So we're hoping that there will be some funding available for our counseling and case managers. As you might well understand, we need all the help that we can get.
We understand that, and we're trying to get help from our sister city across Wright Street, too. Charlie?
Ms. Hyatt, are you by any chance the new director?
I am. I'm
Oh,
the new
okay.
executive director.
Could you
Well,
give us a little bit
welcome.
of background then, please? Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm a social work administrator. I come from Northern Illinois, where I ran a similar program, homeless women and kids. And I came down here. My husband and I were both looking for a more progressive community, a more diverse community. And we are absolutely thrilled to be here, and we're trying urban dwelling in downtown Urbana, and we
Well,
love it.
Welcome on 2 counts then.
There's a lot of work to be done here along homelessness. We have
and
4
the checks
shelters.
in the mail.
Pardon?
And the checks in the mail.
Thank you.
Eric?
Yeah, I mean, we will allocate money for social services this year. And, you know, our budget is approximately level. And so we anticipate that the dollars will be similar to last year's. So I think you can be, even though we haven't voted on this yet, I think I know my colleagues well enough to be confident that that's the way it's going to be. So, and also I'll just repeat what Charlie said, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Claudia Lenhoff.
Good evening. My name is Claudia Lenhoff, and I reside at 312 South Poplar. And I'm here on behalf of Champaign County Healthcare Consumers, also to talk about the social services funding allocation. Before I say that, though, I wanted to say 2 things. One, I will follow up with Carol Elliott about healthcare consumers reestablishing ourselves as a workfare site. We had been for many years, and I think somehow that fell off, and we're very willing to do that. Secondly, Carol's exactly right that a lot of the clients who receive general assistance will be eligible to get health insurance under the health reform law, and enrollment will begin in October, and we'll be reaching out to the township to try to work with the clients and help them get enrolled through the health insurance marketplace, as it's going to be called. So I wanted to just say, with regard to the social services funding, I think this is just from healthcare consumers' perspective. I think that the way you all do it is actually very effective, and I would hate to see it change too much. I do understand more rigor and clearer priorities would be helpful, as long as the priorities are not constantly shifting or changing every year or every couple of years like some funders do. I see the social services funding program as it currently is as a smart investment in the nonprofit social service sector of our community, so that those of us who provide social services can be a partner with local government to address our community's needs, including some very complex human needs. Whatever ends up happening, I really hope that it is not in a direction that favors only large nonprofits to the exclusion of the smaller nonprofits. Some of us that work in the smaller nonprofits frequently have greater flexibility in how we can administer our services and meet the changing needs of the families and individuals in our communities. I understand that sometimes people want to shift the emphasis and prioritize a certain subpopulation or issue. We see many foundations going through process like that, where they say, we're not doing healthcare anymore, we're going to do education, or we're only going to focus on a segment of the population. But I think that doing so denies the reality of how so many issues are tied together. And prioritizing one issue or one group over another can actually result in destabilizing the network of services that exists that help families deal with the many complex issues they face. I know I corresponded with some of you all over email and gave an example about childhood education, something that's very important. We all agree on that. But there's a social ecology for education and families. And so the health of the children is very important. Nutrition of children is very important. Likewise, health and nutrition of parents is very important so that their children can be healthy and show up at educational sites ready to learn. So that's just one little example of how those different issues are tied together. Sort of an example, I guess, of not that you all are thinking about this, but sort of an example of how not to do things is that many funders only fund new programs. That's their interest, is in only funding new programs. And what that does is that forces nonprofits to reinvent themselves or reinvent their services to fit those funding priorities, or some even will create new programs at the expense of building capacity for the established needed programs. It's okay to fund new things, but hopefully not to the exclusion of the things that work. One of the things that I really value about the social services funding program that you all do is that it has actually resulted in organizations like Healthcare Consumers.
Ms. Linhoff, you
Yeah.
have 1 minute.
Are you serious? Okay, well then, there's an email that I wrote, and y'all can read it. I wanted to say thank you. The other thing that I wanted to say is I 100% agree with you all that the City of Champaign needs to step up. It is time for the City of Champaign to start funding some of these social service organizations that benefit our entire community, and I would like to make myself available to work with you all if there is a way to have dialogue with them or try to help them move in that direction. I agree with you 100%. One of the last times when the city was doing social services funding, sadly, it was only for bricks and mortar. And so an organization like Champaign County Healthcare Consumers that rents space doesn't have bricks and mortar. Our capital is in human beings who help other human beings. So I just wanted to say I would be happy to work with you all on that.
Okay.
Is that my time's up?
Okay. Charlie has a question for you.
Yeah, Claudia, thanks for your kind words. One thing you said in your email that I thought was important, I'd like it just to flesh it out a little bit. You said that you have used, or Healthcare Consumers has used our small amounts of money as leverage for other things. Could you describe that a little bit, please, what you've done?
Yes, that's one of the great things about the funding that we have gotten from you all is a lot of times when we're applying for other funding, whether it's with a private foundation or a certain donor or even other government funds, they will ask about whether you have local support. And you all fund us for our direct services through the hotline. And when we're applying for funding for the hotline, we are able to say, that the City of Champaign funds us at this level.
That would be Urbana, wouldn't it?
I'm sorry, City of Urbana. You're absolutely right. That is a really weird mistake that I just made. I apologize.
We
for
hope that will be true in the future.
Yes, yeah, maybe it's a prophecy. But yeah, you're right. We have used that. We've said that the City of Urbana invests in this service, and it has helped leverage matching funds. And that actually has, over the years, helped us move our hotline coordinator position from when I started as director, it was a very small FTE, 0.10 FTE. It's now one full-time equivalent position. Over the years, that's what we've been able to do with your funding, and as such, to provide services to all Urbana residents who need them.
Did you have a question? Brandon?
Yeah. One of the things I wondered if you could speak a little more about is the issue of Urbana funding services, particularly for Urbana residents, versus, funding services that might be open to anybody who might call your hotline, for example. So I know some of the questions on our application say, of all the people you serve, how many of them are Urbana residents? And one of the things we've discussed in changing this program and in changing our funding criteria is how we can even more so target our funds to just go to support services for Urbana residents, but we don't want to be propping up all the other jurisdictions that might not contribute to the social safety net. But I think in practicality that could have repercussions that would be very hard to do. I mean, in a program like yours, when the phone rings, you don't necessarily know, is this person truly an Urbana resident? is this person truly a Champaign resident? And if, you know, if your staff are only paid to help Urbana residents and someone else calls or you pick up the phone, you can't really differentially provide services to those different populations. So I guess I wonder if you could speak a little bit about how you handle currently the the different jurisdictions that funding might come from, and if there's any way that we could put our dollars in a way that would support Urbana residents, or is that necessarily just going to erode your services or be difficult to manage?
Well, the way that we do it, and when I come to you and I ask for funding of you, I ask for funding to serve the proportion of clients who we have who are Urbana residents. You're right that when somebody calls our hotline or walks into our office, we don't know immediately, where they are from. We do find out and we do track that. That's part of how we're able to do the reporting. Sometimes if somebody just calls and they need a phone number to Champaign-Urbana Public Health District and we don't get a chance to ask them where they're from, we don't get that information. But certainly the more intensive services, we do track where they're from, and we allocate, proportionately. And if something were to happen within my organization, I don't know how other organizations handle it, but for example, if something were to happen in my organization where all of a sudden, let's say 80% of our clients are coming from Champaign, and I've written a proposal to you saying that 40 or 50% are from Urbana, then I have the responsibility then to, even with the volume from Champaign, I need to go to Urbana, I need to reach out to the people of Urbana and try to get more people coming in just to make sure that we're serving proportionately what we asked you for funding for. I do think it would be very tough for organizations to sort of segregate their services, but I think in accounting to you and in writing the proposal to you, if they keep some records, they should be able to give you a realistic estimate. I don't know that answers your question. But.
And maybe just one quick follow-up. It's in a situation like that where we particularly fund those services to go to the share of your clientele who are from Urbana, and maybe Champaign doesn't do the same, then it's not like Urbana residents are getting any higher level of service from your hotline, right? I mean, everybody who calls gets the same help. It's just the case that the other sources of funds you get have to go more so to cover Champaign because their municipality didn't?
That's exactly right. So then, so if I have a budget for the hotline, I'll just use, let's say my budget is $60,000, and we're getting, 16 or 20 from Urbana. I have to go and get the other 40,000 from different sources, and that's where it sure would help if Champaign would step up. In the past, we've gotten help from the Village of Rantoul, but in the past, Rantoul would not fund the same program 2 years in a row. You had to have a new program or propose some separate service and things like that. But yeah, you're right. We have to get funding from other sources to be able to serve the rest of the clientele.
Okay, well, thank you. It's helpful to understand, and I really do think the only solution is for both municipalities to end up cooperating and supporting some of these citywide and countywide efforts. So
I'd love to help with that.
thank you.
A lot.
Eric Jacobson has a question.
So I guess it's, it's a statement preceding a question. Your letter brought to my mind that in the community, in the granting community that I function in my professional life, which is scientific research grants, and I've been on both sides of that. I've worked for a granting agency, and I've received grants, and I've also participated, and maybe most of the point here, I've participated in workshops that the granting agencies convene of research scientists to help the granting agencies establish priorities, because the granting agencies know that the people who are most knowledgeable are the people who are doing the research. And so what your letter made me realize, and I'm a little bit embarrassed that it didn't occur to me much earlier in the process than this, is that we haven't done the equivalent thing. We really haven't brought together service providers to get their perspective on what our priorities should be, and your perspective, indeed. So I guess I'm hoping that as we, continue these kinds of deliberations, that we will do that. I'm feeling a little bit abashed because I'm kind of finding myself in a situation that when I've been, as a worker, as a research worker, I've sometimes criticized bureaucrats about that. Gosh, who are they to tell me what the priorities should be? So thank you for at least reminding me of that, and I hope that we'll think about that in the future.
Sure. I mean, we'd be happy to participate in any kind of process. And again, hopefully I can follow up with somebody about what we can do about the city of Champaign. I'm serious
And we
about that.
really appreciate healthcare consumers. We realize that this is the best organization in the state. Are you the only one that does what you do?
Yeah, we are.
Okay, so we're very fortunate, so
Thank
we
you very
appreciate what
much.
you do.
Thank you. And thank you all for your support.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to briefly go back to additions to the agenda. We had another request for an addition to the agenda.
Thank you.
You
Yes,
just want to put it on the agenda?
No, what I wanted to do was let you know that the presentation for Hamilton on the Park is going to be rescheduled. The
Okay.
developer's the
Okay.
one who was going to be here but wasn't able to do so. So it's been
Okay.
rescheduled to the 25th of March.
Okay, so it's subtractions from the
Yes,
agenda?
subtraction.
Okay.
I was
All right.
told that's where it needed to be.
Okay,
so-
all right, thank you very much. All right, we have now moved reports of
Mayor?
special committees.
I have
Yeah, Diane.
communication.
Oh, you're still going, okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to make a comment on two different topics. The first is on sewer laterals, and then the second is related to the condemnations last week. Regarding the sewer laterals, if you recall, last week we asked Public Works to evaluate alternatives for maintenance of sewer laterals when there has to be repairs in the public right-of-way, and this was in response to concerns raised by residents in the Dr. Ellis subdivision. So we expect to get that report in a few weeks, and then we'll begin discussing options available to us. But in the meantime, we left an ordinance in committee that would have provided additional financial assistance for property owners now, when their sewer repairs require tearing up public streets and sidewalks. And after I got home last week and thought about it last week, I couldn't come up with a good reason for why we left it in committee, because the two actions, looking at alternatives for the future and providing this additional financial assistance, are not mutually exclusive. So I'm hoping that next week in the Committee of the Whole we can reconsider that ordinance and send it to council with a recommendation for approval. We have the money in the fund from the current sewer benefit tax. We know from experience that there are going to be 5 to 10 property owners who have to pay for repairs to streets and sidewalks this year, and we know based on experience that most of these repairs will be in the oldest part of Urbana, which is east and west of downtown. And if we can provide a little extra money in the form of an extra $1,500 that's available to folks this year while we're looking at options and policy changes for the future, I think we should do it. So I hope that we will have a discussion and can have that on the Committee of the Whole for next week.
Okay, anybody else have a communication?
I have another one.
Okay, go ahead.
That was my first communication.
All right,
Long-winded, but on to the second one. The second one is related to the situation last week where the City of Urbana condemned the 3 properties at 1302, 1304, and 1401 Silver, and that was due to the hazardous conditions of the exterior balconies and stairways. So I have a couple thoughts related to that, and it again goes to next week's committee meeting. One is I call for the city to revoke the rental registration for those 3 properties, and I would like this item placed on the agenda for next week. And our rental registration ordinance provides for revoking the existing registration of a rental property when that property falls into a Class F designation, and condemnation is Class F designation. I think revoking the registration would be a public declaration that the City of Urbana is committed to safe and quality housing, and I strongly believe we owe this to the tenants and to the nearby residents and neighbors. When the owner repairs the buildings, brings them up to code, and they're safe for occupancy, then he can follow the process for re-registering the properties. So I'm asking that we get this for consideration on next week's committee meeting. And then my last comment is related to many of the conversations I've had in the past few days with various people regarding the systems and processes that we have in place. I think Urbana is way ahead of the curve in terms of the way it handles property management and maintenance in that we have a problem properties group now, which I thought was a great addition to the process. We have our rental registration ordinance, aggravated nuisance ordinance. We have a lot of policies in place, but I think occasionally, and I think this is a good time to do it, we need to make sure we're following best practices when it comes to enforcement and effective enforcement, and look at ways, if there are ways that we can improve our enforcement and be more effective at preventing building deterioration and mismanagement. And Esther, Pat said it, and I'll repeat it, this is a city of renters. We're 2/3 of the households in this city are rental. And we talk a lot about rental properties, and that's why, because our policies and practices affect every single neighborhood in Urbana. And we also have to realize that the rental landscape is changing. There are a lot more out-of-town owners. There are more investment groups who are buying up properties and building things. The student housing is being concentrated on campus, which means housing farther from campus is more vulnerable to mismanagement and deterioration sometimes. And we're finding some people owning many multifamily buildings within a small geographic area, and that can have a profound effect on a neighborhood. And our population has changed, so we need to make sure our policies and practices, and especially the systems and practices we follow, are as effective and flexible and tailored to our city's specific needs and to the new realities of the rental market. So I look forward to working with the city on making sure our systems are as effective and as they can be.
Okay. Anyone else? Dennis.
We're about to have a presentation from the Sister City Committee. But as a part of that, and because we're working closely with the Center for African Studies through our work with the Sister Cities, I just wanted to hold up a flyer that I received today announcing a seminar that they're holding next Monday from 9 o'clock until 3:30 at the Levis Faculty Center. And the topic of the seminar is Peace Building in West Africa, Looking for Answers. And this is a seminar that they've had drafted and imagined before the crisis occurred in Mali, in West Africa. So it's a cogent and timely topic, and it ought to be a very interesting discussion. And Mayor Pressing is going to be doing an introductory welcoming speech at the beginning, so that's another connection for the city.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have a report of a special committee. This is very rare that we get a report of a special committee, but here they are. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Chris Storr? Yes.
I'm Chris Storr. I'm from the historic East Urbana area. Scott.
I'm Scott Tess. I'm from the historic West Urbana area.
Thank you. Pleased to come before you to talk about the Urbana Sister City involvement with Zomba, Malawi, and the Haizu district of Guangzhou, which is another sister city with our city. Just to refresh everyone on their geography, Malawi is a landlocked country in southeastern Africa. It's at the south end of the East African Rift. It's dominated by Lake Malawi, which is the 4th deepest lake in the world. And we are working, sister city with Zomba, which is the former capital of the British colony of Nyasaland. Malawi has about the same size and population as the state of Pennsylvania. It is one of the poorest countries in Africa. Most of the inhabitants are Christian, about 10% are Muslim. They speak 7 languages, and there's 3 ethnic groups. About $860 per person is their annual income. Agriculture is their principal source of foreign exchange, and but mining is increasing. The Urbana became involved with the Zomba through the Presbyterian Church. The late Reverend Don Mason, who helped to establish a Jeans Central African Council Presbyterian Church in Damasi. They also helped to build more than 600 shallow wells. In 2009, Urbana and Zomba became sister cities through the intervention of Councilman or Alderman Dennis Roberts. In 2010, the sister cities funded the African Urban Poverty Alleviation Program for 3 projects in Zomba, 2 of which were proceeded with construction in 2010. And I'll talk about those. And in 2012, the projects were completed and mostly became in operation. That same year, the Haizu district and Urbana became sister cities through the intervention of Mayor Pressing and Professor Ping Chen from Eastern Illinois University. This past year, Urbana participated with the Sister City International Sino-African Initiative, a 3-way group to work on a development project to divert waste from landfilling to composting for mulch and fertilizer. Dr. Kai-Rong Lin was unable to come this evening, but he represents Sun Yat-sen University, which is in the Haizu district, Guangzhou, Guangdong People's Republic of China. He sends his greetings and apologies for inability to come this evening. This is the a scene from the Guardian Village outside the hospital at Zomba. This is a regional hospital, and the Guardians are folks who come to take care of patients at the hospital. When you're admitted to the hospital in Zomba, the medical staff take care of your medical needs, and that's all. If you want food, clean clothes, some nursing care, that has to be provided by a family member. And unfortunately, there is no place outside the hospital at the time for those guardians to wash, bathe, and do laundry. This is the recently completed and now open Guardian Ablution Block outside that hospital. The people that you see here include members of the Zomba Sister City Committee, the City Council, and the Urbana Sister Cities group, and the fellow who is running the ablution block. This is Mr. John Dimmitt showing one of the showers that is available. These are segregated by sex. And on the right, you can see the clothesline so that the clothes no longer have to be spread on the ground, trees, bushes. There is even a facility for doing the washing, which is done by hand. And there are toilets, flushable toilets available and for the guardians. Again, members of the Sister City Committee, the city, and the fellow running the ablution block. And other projects we were proud to be part of were toilets at local schools. You'll see on the right that some of the toilets have doors. When young girls get to be of a certain age, they desire privacy in their toilet. These doors provide that privacy and allow those children to continue their education so that there is reduced early pregnancy, reduced HIV infection, and reduced poverty, all for the installation of doors on toilets. This photo shows the committee again at yet another school, Chikamveka. However, there's 6 toilets for the girls and 6 for the boys. These 12 toilets serve 3,000 students and 59 faculty. Yes, there is a line to use the toilet. Scott?
So the new project that the Sister Cities is working on is part of the Sino-African Initiative. This is a project funded by the Gates Foundation through Sister Cities International. And the idea here is to leverage the relationships of the Sister Cities International program to do more sustainable development work. And it's again a tripart relationship. The work is done at cities in Africa who have sister cities in China and the United States, and just like the Urbana does. There's 4 cities, only 4 cities that are funded through this project, and three cities that are funded through this project, and Urbana is one of them. So that's very fortunate. Or Zomba, our sister city, is one of them. So Zomba has a number of liabilities that our project seeks to turn into assets. The first liability is an extensive sewer system through the city that in many places is in need of substantial repair. So that photo is flowing sewage there. Another liability is an older, about a 45-year-old sewage treatment plant that is also in need of substantial maintenance. You can see that this finishing pond is, over time, has started to fill in and lose its storage and treatment capacity. Another liability, the town operates neighborhood-based garbage collection. So neighbors bring their garbage to a central bunker and leave it there for the city to pick up. The amount of garbage that's being generated is a lot more than what the city can handle, and that's the photo you see there. Last liability is an unlined garbage dump. Now to go back and flip these all to assets. They have an extensive sewage distribution system. That's an asset. They have essentially a modern sewage treatment plant that looks very similar to ours here. It just needs maintenance. And both of these things allow the city to collect, treat sewage. That's an asset. They also generate a lot of biosolids. Biosolids are the particulates that's left over at the end of a sewage treatment process. Oftentimes that's seen as a liability. We're turning that into an asset in Zomba by providing a facility where those biosolids can be composted into a fertilizer. We know that that's an asset already because the biosolids that are generated at present keep disappearing from the city site because people are taking it for fertilizer. We're going to be combining that with a second project at the neighborhood bunker locations. We're going to be separating them into 2 side-by-side facilities. One's going to collect the garbage that we can't do anything with. The other is going to collect, if you take a look, almost all this garbage, maybe half, maybe 3/4, is organics. It's food scrap, it's vegetative waste. We're going to collect that separate from the milk cartons and soda bottles, and we're going to bring that also to the sewage treatment facility, and we're going to compost that into a valuable product. Again, turning a liability into an asset. Then the city's going to take this, the compost from the food scrap and the compost from the biosolids, blend it, sell it back to the residents. So we're going to be generating revenue for the city, and that's going to make their garbage collection system more reliable, more sustainable financially. So part of this project was for all the three projects and the 3 cities for each project to first start to develop their project long distance, so that's email and phone. But the success of these types of projects really relies on the relationships that get built that ensure the work gets done and is successful. So they brought all the partners to Nairobi for a conference. And we went through 3 days of fairly intense project review. There was training in project management. It was really valuable. And the headsets there are because there are multiple languages spoken at this conference, so we had live translation. It was very valuable. And this is a photo in...
and we signed an agreement.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and we signed an agreement that laid out, stipulated, the work to be done, how it'll be done, and the funds for it.
Who's responsible?
And who's responsible, the most important part.
The people who participated from Urbana.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm pleased to report that 4 of us went to Malawi. Myself, Mr. Scott Test, who was a new member of the Urbana Sister Cities Committee and provided a good deal of technical support that really made the project succeed. Mr. John Dimmitt, who is known to many of us here in the community, and Mr. Sam Smith, also known to many of us in the committee, who is the public outreach engagement director at Krannert Center for the Performing Arts. The young lady in the middle of the photo is Ms. Chelsea Krieger, who is the retiring or Peace Corps volunteer that was so very helpful to work with and in that community, and you see other members of the Zomba Sister City Committee and City Council, and Dr. Tae-Rong Yang, Xiao Yang Teng from China is on the far right. And one of our favorite views from the view of the Zomba Plateau from Chancellor College.
And
No,
it's
it
not
isn't all.
completely
No, it
all,
isn't
is it?
all.
There's some very important information that you want to share with us.
That's right. It isn't all. At the end of this month, on March 23rd through the 29th, we're going to be pleased to host 6 people from Zomba, Malawi, to come here to work with, to visit some of our sewage treatment site, our composting facility, visit with some of their local technical counterparts in the city and university. And they will also make presentations, and all of you, everybody, will have an opportunity to meet them on March 26th at the IMC for a Malawi mixer, and that more information will be forthcoming about that. And there's other program that we can certainly make available to anyone who has an interest, and maybe we can make have a link on the Urbana website. Oh, one more thing. We do have, since we went to the meeting, and we have something for the city, and we'd like to make a presentation to the mayor and the council at this time, if that's agreeable.
If you can make it through security here.
Sure.
It's well packaged because they have to travel a long ways.
Oh, my goodness.
This is from the first ever conference of this kind, 3 cities. This is supposed to be a...
Globe may fall out, so just be careful.
Okay, it's a globe.
Take it out.
We can take it out.
Okay. So here's a beautiful globe.
It's really sweet. And the bag and the lanyard as well.
Okay. Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah, the Sister Cities and Gates Foundation hopes that this will be a prototype project to help make sustainable development throughout the Third World.
Would you like to say who the other 2 cities are? There are only 3 cities in the country.
Oh,
He wants to get a photo.
oh,
Okay.
sure. Yeah.
All right.
Let's do it.
Well, get everybody to stand up maybe and get in the picture. Council members want to get in the picture here? They're spinning the globe. Here, I'll hold this. All right. Here we are.
Back it up. Yeah. Say cheese. We didn't bring our sunglasses.
We forgot our sunglasses. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Now, who are the other 2 cities in the country?
It was Denver, Colorado, Asheville, Raleigh, North Carolina combined.
Okay.
And we got to meet folks from those 5 cities.
So we're in the league with Denver, Colorado, and Asheville, North Carolina. So we're the smallest one, but we go second to none, right? Well, thank you very much for the presentation. Is there anything else that you wanted to say? Okay, thank you very
I
much.
just wanted to add that, so we're expecting this group of people this is our second delegation of visitors from Zomba to the city of Urbana. 6 individuals, including the head of the Sister City organization, Mr. Vuapiri, who's the director of Chancellor's Library. He's going to be leading the delegation. And we're going to be here. They're going to be coming in on Sunday, or is it Saturday, the 23rd, and they'll be here all week. And one of the really great parts about this program is that they're going to partner with members of Bill Gray's staff in Public Works and some of the educators in the city and librarians at the university on a day of mentoring and professional growth, where they're going to be shadowing and learning how we do our practices here in Urbana, to be able to take those practices and best procedures back to them and inspire maybe the office assistants and the things that who work with them in Zomba itself.
I'd like to add, on behalf of Dr. Kairong Lin from China, how very happy he is to work with this group to help bring some of the experiences that China has had, so that all of us together can work to help Zomba avoid mistakes and problems that our countries have incurred in development, and to help and for all of us to learn from each other how we can make a healthy environment and help and sustainable growth.
Thank you. Okay, we are up to unfinished business, discussion of the social service funding allocations. Who wanted to do that one? Okay, Kelly Murkowski.
I have copies. Well, I sent the final draft of the application with some suggestions that had been made from the previous meeting. I have hard copies of those if anybody needed to have those if you did not receive the email. Basically what we did is we added a reference to the benefit to Urbana residents from the funding that was allocated to agencies, and also added a chart for fundraising history under revenues. So those were the two things that we added. No, I don't.
Brandon?
Yeah, maybe a couple quick items. One, Kelly, in the updated application that you sent, I guess I just wanted to comment on that wording in the wording about fundraising history. That was that in D3, where you added a question about fundraising history. I guess the way it was worded to me looked like it was only fundraising events, in the sense of like, oh, we have an evening banquet and we ask for people to pay tickets and we do that as a fundraising event. But I think, I mean, depending on what other people think, I think it would be helpful to have, other than just fundraising events, have some sense of what any other fundraising activities they had done, broader than just a physical event that someone shows up and buys a ticket to. So I guess I thought that broadening that from just events to their fundraising activities over the past 12 months would be an easy change that would give us a comprehensive picture.
Okay. Can do that.
My one other suggestion I wanted to raise was about this question of supplanting or replacing funding from other jurisdictions. And I guess after some of the things that Claudia Linhoff from Healthcare Consumers said, and after my trying to think about it, I guess I don't see how we can penalize or punish agencies for this, supplanting sort of effect. In a case like the Healthcare Consumers, there's nothing they can do at their hotline to give Urbana residents a higher differential level of treatment. I mean, you're either going to help someone at the hotline and refer them to a dentist, in this case at the dental hotline, or you're not going to help them. But there's not some differential that we can ask for that will be provided to Urbana residents and not to others in a situation like that. And yet I don't think we should be punishing the Healthcare Consumers for that. I think the only solution is to work with our other city, Champaign, and to help them to fund this program as well, because it simply is going to benefit both people. And I think the way Claudia described it, the supplanting effect happens. I mean, when we fund our share of the people that call into that hotline, Champaign doesn't fund Champaign's share. And so the agency goes out to seek other funders, they're, backfilling the funding sort of for Champaign's share of it. And I don't think there's any way around that or anything we could necessarily do or any way that we could tell an agency like that to give our residents a higher level of service. I just don't think that's practical. I think the only real solution is equitable funding from all the municipalities. So in the scoring, I just hope we don't penalize an agency like that when it's really not their fault. I hope that instead we work with Claudia to try to bring the city of Champaign to the table so that the basic social safety net is something we all fund together.
Eric?
Yeah, I agree with Brandon on that point. It's just an impossible calculus problem, and we have to be sure that we just don't let human needs go unmet. I mean, this is right after we saw a presentation of the Sister City program, and none of the people in Zumba pay taxes in Urbana. But I think it's absolutely great that we're participating in it. It's just the right thing to do.
Charlie?
I think we can have the expectation, and many of the programs do serve are clientele-based, and they can measure and show the impact on Urbana residents. And I think we can make that distinction. So I think we can have the expectation that it's supplemental, that it supplants, in some cases, is just going to be part of the game. I mean, we understand that. But where it can clearly make a difference for Urbana residents, it should.
Diane?
We could just add maybe if possible at the end of number 10 or something like that.
Yeah.
To the extent possible.
Because, I think they have a responsibility, but I don't think you can divide it and say there's going to be more going to Urbana.
No.
The whole point of this was that I don't think you can divide it in terms of arithmetic. The only way to do it is have every organization that's getting their people helped, join in the contributions, which we normally do. All the things that we work on, QOTS, METCAD, all the things that the cities work on together, we do share the funding. And so this is, I think it really boils down to we need the help of Champaign. So we can't expect that the people are going to be isolated and the Urbana money goes only for Urbana people. I think that's really, really unrealistic.
Would it make more sense just to delete number 10?
I think it would. I really do.
All right.
Is there a Dennis?
And also, just from a practical standpoint, we're looking to put focus on service to Urbana, and the rating system that we've devising and the application itself gives us a sense of how much that is achieved. But ultimately, when we assign the funding itself, it can still be modified by selective choices that have nothing to do with necessarily the strict application of that process of ratings, because ultimately we're going to be trying to make a fair and equitable division of the funds available to the best sources possible. So we're trying to help people through this application to focus on our needs, but we're certainly not going to ignore the fact that there are needs everywhere.
Charlie?
Well, before we throw this completely out, let me just read you the wording here, so that which I think makes sense, and so we can change it to read. This is number 10. We expect that consolidated social service funding will supplement agency services in Urbana rather than replace or supplant funding for services allocated to Urbana residents to the extent possible, so that the end result is increased level of service to Urbana residents. I mean, I don't see how that statement now, with that adjustment.
But we don't expect to get increased services to Urbana residents. We expect to have the agency maybe get more money totally. We need to understand how they leverage our money and how they leverage Champaign's money. But, okay.
We could take out, okay, so here, okay, so, yeah, okay, let me make it a little simpler then. I still think it's important to make some Urbana-specific request here.
Okay.
So how about we just drop out the last clause so that it now ends, rather than replace or supplant funding for services allocated to Urbana residents to the extent possible.
Okay.
And just leave it at that.
Is that a motion?
Well,
you
we
had
have,
to-
this is a draft, so when we agree on the language, we can pass the guiding principles. And that's the change I've just.
Okay, is there anybody else that has changes? Is there a motion to adopt this?
I would move to adopt
Second.
version 5, which is what I'll call it.
This is version 5?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, there's a motion by Charlie, seconded by Diane. Any other discussion? And this is to adopt it with the
change. Yes.
with the change in number 10. Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Good gracious, we've adopted this.
You guys did a
Okay,
good job.
thank you very much. Oh, this is just the beginning. We
Yeah,
got the
we got
principles, and then we
all
got to do the other stuff.
Yep.
Okay, is there any other discussion on social services? Did you want to say something?
Other than the change for activity, events versus activity, do all the rest of the questions answer what you were looking for?
Applications start when?
Pardon me?
Tomorrow.
Applications start.
Well, we will probably, if it's approved tonight, we can get it out this week. And then it would be due the first week in April, with a training next week, probably.
Okay. Diane?
Well, I'd move approval of the revised application and the revision 5 of the Consolidated Social Service Funding Scoring and Evaluation Sheet. So we have the scoring sheet, the guiding principles, and a new application, a revised application.
I thought we were just voting on the application now.
I just added in the scoring sheet.
I would personally prefer to consider them separately.
Oh, okay.
To make adjustments.
I don't have the new
Scoring
scoring
sheet.
sheet. Did you send it to me by
I
email?
sent it with Diane's, with that same, it should have been 2 documents
Okay,
there.
well, I got the principles and I got the scoring and evaluation, but I didn't get the application, but I'll
yeah,
deal
the
with that.
application was sent by staff.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to have a separate motion. Now, who made that motion?
I moved approval of the application.
Is there a second? Okay. Motion by Diane Marlin, seconded by Eric Jacobson to approve the application. Any discussion? Oh, thank you very much. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, then we move to the funding, scoring, and evaluation, revision 5.
Okay, and this one, we have a month to work on
Oh.
and fine tune here, so we can keep working on this. So mostly tonight, I need more feedback on how to make adjustments. Nobody emailed me anything.
Eric?
So I have a concern, or at least a question, and perhaps the attorney may want to chime in on this. In the past, we have had our deliberations on social service funding FOIA'd by the News Gazette. And so I, sent them a whole bunch of spreadsheets. Now, if we require, if we're going to adopt a procedure that requires each of the council members to fill out a score sheet for each application, it seems to me those might be FOIAble.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'd like to ask our attorney about that.
It really depends on how it's handled. If it's considered, shall we say, deliberations, then they might be protected. It would be a stretch, but they might be protected. Obviously, I'd want to review the act on that one exemption. Section 7, I believe, of the exemptions allows for deliberations on policies, but once it's done, once the deliberations are over, then they would be FOIAble. Because there's nothing to protect anymore in terms of what's, in terms of if there's a question of secrecy or something like that. So my view is always less paper, the better.
So I guess in that light, and we absolutely have nothing, I think, to hide. But on the other hand, I guess the question is, does each council person want to expose, does each council person want to put in the public domain their scoring for each proposal?
Sure.
You might not want to, on the score sheets, identify who the scorer is. I mean, you're looking for the results, not the person who's doing the scoring, so that may be one way of doing it. The other way of doing it, there's no requirement that once the scoring is done, unless you feel you need it just for historical purposes, because you create a document like that, which is nothing more than a deliberative document, that you keep the document.
Okay.
But the easiest way would just not identify the scorer.
But I guess the precedent is certainly that the spreadsheets where each council person submits their recommendation for funding level for each of the applications, those, we have treated those in the past as documents that would be shared with the public as requested.
The problem that I would see in terms of producing that in response to a FOIA request is really not a matter of the production itself. It's a matter of when in the process. I think one of the reasons you might want to try to protect these initially is during the deliberative process. So as information comes out, others don't try to use the information, to convince you of some other funding that you're thinking of doing or not doing. But once you've made your funding commitments, then the purposes of the scoring, there's the influence is not, the opportunity for influence is no longer there. And if you want, I'm not aware of any law that requires you to keep those scorecards. You can reduce it to a spreadsheet, and it doesn't matter who, as I said before, who actually provided a particular score per category or per item on a spreadsheet. And frankly, that kind of thing probably would be, the way I see it, fairly valuable, because it clearly shows, unlike many organizations, that the city of Urbana has taken not only the need and the recognition for funding, but the approach to it very seriously, very careful, and systematic. It shows a great deal of deliberation all in one simple spreadsheet.
Charlie?
I viewed this evaluation form as something we would individually use at our discretion. Yeah, that's the way. These are they're for you to use to come up with your scores individually, and if you choose to do it by some other method, I think that's fine.
Yeah, that's kind of how I thought it. And I also thought, at the end of the day, what I put down on paper doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, what's going to get allocated is going to get allocated regardless of, what my score was. Their monies are going to go to an agency or they're not. And so I just think that that's something that's kind of maybe even more on a personal level, more than something that needs to be FOIA'd.
Okay.
Eric?
Well, I would suggest one other thing on the score sheet, and that is the appropriateness of the requested budget. Because at the end of the day, what we're each going to submit is a recommended dollar amount for the for that particular agency's request, and all of us will. I mean, in that instance, I think we'll all probably automatically consider the appropriateness of the budget. So might as well go in the score sheet. The recommended score sheet as well. Yeah, we do. We do have their amount allocated. Amount requested, and our suggested allocation. But then there are many factors that go into the relationship between what the applicant requests and what we would suggest to allocate, and much of that is, how well we think their mission is aligned with our priorities, but part of that would also be the extent to which the budget request that they make is appropriate to what they say they're going to do. So I think that deserves to be an item in the score sheet.
Okay, well, there are two things I want to fix. I'll work with Eric here right now to fix this when we're done. And
Do you have to do it right now, or can you just, if we're still going to do this for a week, can you?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I'll grab Eric while I can and get it done. And I need to make another little change, which is the supplemental versus replacement type thing. I want to change that language to reflect what we did tonight as well. So there'll be a couple of tweaks here that I will send around.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Anyone else? Brandon?
Yeah, I just wondered if perhaps Charlie or Diane, you in this process had a clear vision for how we're going to allocate more funding to the youth and pre-K categories. I know, in the packet, I think it was last week, we had that nice spreadsheet showing all of our grantees in 5 buckets and the percentage of our total dollars that went to those 5 buckets. And we talked about putting additional emphasis on the bucket that includes youth and pre-K sort of services. And of course, that'll mean a lower percentage to some of those other categories, whether it's seniors or basic services. But if we're going to try to make a systematic effort to increase one of those buckets and lower the others, I don't yet see a way that this scoring sheet or the process of turning in numbers will effectuate that shift.
Could I respond to that? I don't think we've dealt with that yet. Any new money is going to have to come from our sister city, Champaign, taking up some of the load, because otherwise we'd have to keep funding what we're funding right now, because we don't have any new money unless our financial situation changes drastically. But I think we should try some different scenarios and say, what would the youth cost, based on what Champaign pays, and what do we want to put into early education, and then we have some ballpark to work with. Mm-hmm. We're going to get the information from the schools on what it would take to fund the early childhood. They're building the facilities at Prairie, and I'm going to get the information from Preston Williams. So I think we still have that to work on. That comes later in the process. Dennis?
But how can we make those subtle adjustments to our own goals without actually having any word of any kind of commitment so far from across the street, across Wright Street?
Well, right now we're just talking about applications, right? When would the applications be back?
They would be due like the first week of April. So it would be about a month.
Okay, so that would be their first information that we get on how much they're requesting, and we should probably talk to them about what they could do if they got some money from Champaign. Mm-hmm. And, just see what we can work out. We have to start somewhere. Eric?
So I guess I'm feeling, especially after hearing a couple of our service providers talk, I'm a little concerned, and I guess this reflects a point I made earlier, or echoes a point I made earlier. I'm a little concerned about affecting any decisive shift in our funding. I think this discussion has been very valuable, but I think that before we actually implement any really decisive shift in our priorities, we need to have the discussion with the service providers. Mm-hmm. And, we've had the discussion with ourselves. It's been a very valuable step. I do have one suggestion, if it's appropriate at this point, on the guiding principles. And I sent a note around, and then I'll also just read it in public, that in the last paragraph where it says for 2013-14 our funding priorities have been the areas of early childhood, including prenatal and summer youth jobs and programming, where appropriate, and then I would suggest adding, where appropriate to the mission of the agency and the degree of training required, paid youth internships associated with the mission of the applicant agency are encouraged. So, and the reason I'm suggesting that is that where it is aligned properly with the mission of the agency, that would be, extremely meaningful summer youth employment. It wouldn't be suitable for all agencies, but for some agencies, it it might very well be.
That, we've already adopted the principles, but that's also in line with what Carol Elliott was talking about. So maybe we just need to have an amendment next week or something, do the language on what you just said, plus what Carol's talking about. She's really talking about the people that we help, you know, giving some internships or work or whatever to the people that we're trying to serve.
We can fix this right now.
That's in there already.
Okay, it is in there.
Number 8.
Number 8.
Carol's.
Oh, Carol's is in there.
Yeah, Carol's
Okay,
is
so
in
maybe you could, well, we could think of a, you know, shift the numbers or whatever you want to do, if you don't have the language right now.
Oh, I do have the language, and I confess that I responded to Diane's email with a reply to all, so I wanted to read, so I just read the language in public so that I wouldn't be an egregious violation of the
Okay.
Open Meetings Act.
Okay. Well, we need to amend what we've already approved.
Yeah, I mean, Eric, do you want to make that as an amendment to?
Okay, so,
Move to reconsider, Al.
yeah, so
Read
I'll
it
move
again.
to, I move to insert into
You-
the final paragraph.
Okay, you want to move to reconsider adopting the guiding principles?
Okay, I'll move to reconsider adopting the guiding principles. And-
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay, we can reconsider.
Okay,
Go ahead.
you want to read?
Oh. Okay, I move specifically to insert into the final paragraph of the guiding principles, after the first sentence,
Mhm.
then the following sentence: where appropriate to the mission of the agency and the degree of training required, paid youth internships associated with the mission of the applicant agency are encouraged.
So, you make that a motion?
Yeah, and so, yes, that's my motion, that
Second.
this be inserted.
Second.
Okay, motion by Eric
Email it to me so I can put it in.
and second by Robert Lewis. Do you want to read it? Does the clerk have a copy? You got it? But you got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna fix it right now and mail it to staff.
Okay.
Okay.
So you can mail it to me.
Any discussion? Diane?
Yes, a question was just raised. Would that mean that money going for internships, is that coming from the city to pay youth?
Right, so the point is, if we're going to support summer youth employment, which is stated as a priority, that we would encourage, because they might not otherwise think about it, that mission agencies would include such paid internships as part of their application to us. And the idea being that these would be, exceptionally good summer employment opportunities if they're available and appropriate.
Does that mean you have to change the application?
Possibly.
We're supposed to think of these before tonight.
I'm known as the late but alive Eric Jacobson.
Right.
I don't know, maybe this isn't appropriate for this year. Oh, we gotta hear what, township.
Yeah.
Well, we can just, while we figure
It's
that
gonna
out.
work either way.
Summer employment doesn't necessarily.
Okay. Well, do you need to have the application
internship.
finalized tonight?
No, yes, and get it out.
Yeah.
You need it tonight?
It would be preferable, but if you,
We haven't voted on this yet,
Okay.
so we could vote on it, and maybe the application could be revised to ask about internships.
we could do that. You could
otherwise, how
vote on
would
it,
you
and
do
we
it?
could make the changes and send them to you to make sure that we answered the question.
Okay.
Mhm.
Do you want your Well, we could have a separate motion. Let's vote on the one that's right here now. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, and then maybe there should be a motion to add some kind of information to the application on internships. They'll be sent our guiding principles, right?
Yes.
Okay.
When we do the training, we will make sure that we go over the guiding principles
Okay.
as well.
So we
So-
probably need to move to reconsider the application and do the same thing here, so we can do it.
Well, I
I'd
think
move
you
to
could just
reconsider
make-
the,
Yeah,
Just make amendment.
just making them, just say you want to,
yeah, let's,
Yeah, I
I
think you
move
have
to
a separate
include something to the effect of what
Yeah.
we just included in the mission statement in the application.
That's right.
okay.
Second.
Okay, motion by Charlie Smythe, second by Eric Jacobson to include something in the application to reflect an ability to have interns, youth interns. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Anything else on social services?
Did we
Diane?
get the language? Did you get the language?
He's gonna get
Yeah,
the
I've got it in
language.
there, yeah.
He just emailed it to somebody.
Okay,
When you go home, you'll get it.
all right. Are we ready to move to reports of standing committees?
Sure.
The Committee of the Whole.
Okay, now, so that Jim doesn't have
Now, who did the Committee of the
I'm
Whole?
go- I am. I'm going to do the first one, then Eric's going to do the second one here to keep
Okay.
Jim happy, because Brandon and I will have to recuse ourselves. So from the
Oh,
Committee of the
yes.
Whole, Resolution Number 2013-0205R, resolution approving a Phase 2 preliminary engineering services agreement with ESCA Consultants Incorporated. This is the Florida Avenue and Fowler Road traffic signal improvements for the committee. I so move.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Charlie Smythe, seconded by Dennis Roberts. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Bowersox Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Ms. Marlin.
Yes.
Mr. Roberts.
Yes.
Mr. Smythe. Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
That motion carries.
Okay, for the Committee of the Whole, I move ordinance number 2013-02-017, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 3, Section 343, increasing number of Class AA and AA01 liquor licenses for Capital Investment USA LLC, doing business as Urbana Landmark Hotel, 210 South Race Street.
I second.
Okay, motion by Eric Jacobson, seconded by Dennis Roberts. Would the clerk please call the roll? We have two
Is there-
people that, well, you want to say that formally, I guess, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll also abstain from any discussion or voting on this item, similarly to Charlie, to avoid a conflict of interest.
And we didn't send you the information either.
Oh, yeah.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Ms. Marlin.
Yes.
Mr. Roberts.
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson.
Yes.
That motion carries.
Mayor,
Yes.
I'm very excited that we've approved this motion because it means that the business of the Landmark Hotel is going to become an important focus in the downtown, and it's going to give it life. So I think it's exciting development.
We do what we can.
That's right.
Okay, we'll move on. Reports of officers. Any officers' reports? Bill Gray, Director of Public Works.
Thank you. I want to bring to your attention that there's an open house Thursday, March 7th, between 4 and 7 p.m. at the Activities and Rec Center, ARC, on campus. And this is the University District Traffic Circulation Study. If anybody has any interest in how traffic flows, pedestrian traffic, bicycle traffic, bus traffic, the circulation thereof within the University District, and that's essentially everything west of Lincoln Avenue in our case. Please come to this open house, look at the information, voice your opinions, and give us your ideas. So again, it's 4 to 7 p.m., Thursday, March 7th at ARC.
Brandon?
And Bill, just for some additional info, could you say how this relates to Kuatz and whether this is like a new CATS 4 plan? I mean, is this some new campus plan that we will eventually see and vote on and participate in, or how does this fit in?
Sure. This Kuatz received a 100% grant from IDOT. I forget how many hundred thousands of dollars to do this study, and it's about a 2-year effort. So it's Kuatz staff that's performing the work on campus. This is the first public open house. There'll be probably 2 more as time goes on. And there's kind of an existing conditions assessment. What's the busiest intersection for vehicles, peds, bicyclists, whatever. Some suggested thoughts for improvements or alternative scenario analysis, they call it. But if you have in your mind, if I was king for a day, how would I like, traffic to travel, or how would campus, those are ideas that they're kind of looking for. Now, some may be unrealistic, some may be implementable over a period of time, but that's what this is looking at. So it's really to look at certainly safety, how to deal with all the modes of traffic. As you get into the inner core of the quad, if you will, that's more heavily ped and bike friendly. As you get to the outer portions, it's a little more vehicular traffic sensitive. So yes, it does reflect on CATS. Actually, this is being discussed at CATS 3 meetings. But Kuatz received a grant from IDOT to perform this study.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
Mayor?
Charlie.
It's my understanding that the university is also going to use this same opportunity, the same location, to talk about their bike plan? Or some kind of bike?
I'm not sure. I do know that's just been revealed also.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. It's going to be a twofer here.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other reports of officers?
Yes.
Brandon Boyce.
Hello, Brandon Boyce, redevelopment specialist. I'm going to give you a few highlights from the February Economic Development Report. First off, this week is the Urbana Business Association's first annual restaurant week. You can find the specials on their website. You can watch out for price-fixed menus, $10, $20, and $30 specials at many of our restaurants in and around town. So please patronize our restaurants this week. We held a ribbon cutting actually just a few days ago, for the new Casey's Convenience Store at East University Avenue. It's a much larger, more spacious store just next door to the old one. Construction plans for Campus Circle were dropped off today. Dolly was involved. They're quite extensive, but it's a major project. We're very excited to be moving forward with that. Work is also progressing on Matt Cho's development, the Cake Design Development Project at 208 and 210 West Main. As you may have noticed, there's been a dumpster out front. They're doing some interior demolition and some beginning stages of the facade work, and the design submittals are currently under review. As I'm sure you're aware, Common Ground Food Co-op has completed their grand opening. If you haven't checked it out, there's a lot of new features of that store. It's an exciting addition to Lincoln Square. And I guess the last one, I'm going to keep it brief tonight, that I want to touch on, and you've already heard it, but it's worth saying again that the city was successful in its application for $1.4 million Economic Development Program grant from IDOT for Airport Road in front of FASCA. And I heard that the news got broke on Twitter. So congratulations, Mayor Pressing, for joining the Twitterverse and keeping us all informed.
Thank you for making it possible.
Any questions?
Charlie?
I'm just going to mention that, remind me the name of the 208, 210 West Main.
Matt Cho?
Matt. Yeah, I ran into Matt the other day, and he was all excited because I guess there is a tin ceiling.
Yeah.
In one or both of those. He was really excited about what they found.
Both spaces have a tin ceiling. That's mostly what I think a lot of the interior demolition they're doing so far is removing the hanging ceilings that were put in place when Busey renovated it to be an office. I know he'd put at least one picture on Facebook. We could probably send that out to council so you could see that one picture, but I'm sure they're going to look really fabulous once they're refurbished.
Wow. Diane?
And since Common Ground has expanded and reopened, I have now finally have a response to people when they say, why don't we get a Trader Joe's? I say, we have our own version of Trader Joe's, and it's the new Common Ground Food Co-op. And if people haven't been in there, I think you should go, because it is. They just need a nice, good, cheap wine, and we'll be good.
Well, we did give them a liquor license.
Yeah.
And they do sell wine. I don't know if it's cheap, but they do sell wine.
No, they have some very, very, they have a small selection, but it's good.
And I have to say that at Casey's, they have 8 different kinds of cappuccino, which is pretty awe-inspiring. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on. There's one appointment that I would like, if you would approve. Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, Amelia Neptune.
Is that to replace Morgan as the university representative?
Yeah, she had to resign as the university representative just because of duties there, and Amelia was somebody else who's tied in with FNS and this kind of bike and ped planning on campus
Yeah.
to represent that.
And she's also on the Sustainability Advisory Commission.
Yeah,
We
we have
just
some
appointed
people.
her to that, so
Yeah.
she's going to be,
Yeah, I'm working with her on a project, and I'd highly
riding
recommend her.
her bike to the
I'll move
meetings.
this appointment.
okay? Is there a motion?
Recommendation will second.
Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Thank you very much. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.